Okay, so we've talked about the biomechanics, the physics of uh, creature creation, but now let's talk about evolution. So how do you get there? So the basic idea in evolution is natural selection. Natural selection works the same way as we artificially select larger or smaller dogs, for example, to get new breeds. The difference is that there's no person doing the selection. It's aspects of the environment. In this case, you have a bird that wants to eat butterflies and their caterpillars. If the caterpillar happens to be brown, then it's harder for the bird to see it. And those caterpillars will end up being more common because they aren't eaten. If their brown color is passed on to their offspring, then over time, the population of butterflies will become mostly brown. The question is, why are some butterflies brown and some yellow? The reason is mutation. All the time, through random error, mutations occur. And most of the time, they don't make any difference at all. Most of the rest of the time, they're bad for you. But every now and then, it will produce a difference that is selected for. One of the ways that this works is as an embryo develops, you can see up here at the top, these are all embryos and look more or less the same. As they get older, they start to develop in different ways. And these two start looking different, right? And now, as by the time they're ready to be born, they look very different, and they look recognizable as tortoises and chicks and hogs and so on. All of these changes are caused by hormones that are produced in different parts of the embryo as it develops. For example, the tip of the limb here produces a hormone that encourages the cells to grow longer and make the limb longer. And over time, it grows into a real arm or a leg. Those hormones are produced in the cells, and the cells produce those hormones according to instructions in their DNA. So if the instruction to make a hormone is changed, then it will make a big difference to the way the animal develops. And a lot of evolutionary process is from this sort of developmental changes. You can do a lot. You can say, for example, the fish, as it grows, there's more hormone that makes it grow longer, and now the whole fish is longer. Maybe that would be advantageous, or maybe it wouldn't. Maybe the hormone that's supposed to produce the limbs never gets produced, or it is produced, but the cells in the limbs don't recognize the hormone because the gene that makes them make a receptor for that hormone is turned off. So the limbs never develop, and you get a snake. You can play with development in lots of fun ways like this. Okay. The other thing you often find is reduction in specialization. So imagine you have something like a centipede. It has lots of legs. The legs all more or less look the same. But then you have something like a lobster, where it has some legs it uses for crawling, some legs it uses for grabbing things, other legs down here that it uses to swim with. And the total number of legs is smaller, and each leg is specialized to do something special. Okay. I will say one more thing about lobsters. Lobsters and other arthropods, the sort of fiddly mouth parts that insects have. Those mouth parts look a bit like fingers, and they're not fingers, but they're legs. The ancestral form just had a lot of legs, and it used. So someone talking?
No, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. So you can see this a bit with something like a trilobite. These are fossil arthropods that are extinct these days. Trilobites had a whole bunch of legs. The legs all more or less looked the same, but they had these spiny bases, and those spiny bases were like jaws or teeth. They processed food with them. So you had the same limb that is used both for walking and for processing food, and it had an extension that was a gill. Modern, like a spider, for example, it has special gill limbs that do nothing but extract oxygen from the air, and they're tucked away inside its abdomen. You can't see them. They're called book lungs. It has other limbs that are only used to walk with, and it has limbs at the front that it only uses to grab and inject venom into prey. So it has specialized all of its different parts. Okay, this one is my favorite. Another thing you find a lot in evolution is exaptation, which means using something for a new purpose. So this creature is a tunicate larva. It lives in the ocean. It's very, very small. As an adult, it's just this head part. It sucks water in through one tube. It squirts water out through the other. It extracts plankton in the middle, and that's it. That's its life. But baby tunicates have this tail that it can wiggle and swim to a new place. And then after a while, it settles onto a rock or something, loses its tail, and it grows into this spongy sort of thing that filters plankton out of the water. The interesting thing is that this organ in its body, the part that squirts water out, has these little holes in it. And these holes are useful for catching plankton, like a sieve, and also because they have more surface area, they can extract oxygen from the water. So now you have something like this. This is a lancelet. It's another ocean animal. It brings in food through its mouth, passes the food through this thing with gill slits in it, and extracts, again, oxygen and plankton to eat. This is a lamprey. Lamprey is a kind of fish that has no jaws. It just has a big sucker on the front. This sort of beautiful basket-like thing is the equivalent of the gill slits of the lancelet, but it doesn't use them to extract food. It only uses them to get oxygen out of the water. At some point, millions of years ago, those baskety struts that supported the gill slits, the ones at the very front mutated in such a way that they were larger and could snap closed. And that was the first jaw in a fish. And you can see how this might have happened. We don't have any living animals like this. We don't have any living animals in this intermediate stage, but we do have sharks, which this is exactly how sharks work. They have two big bones here with teeth on them that they use to bite you, and they have other bones behind them that these ones are supporting the jaws, and these ones here support the gill slits, and the gills extract oxygen from the water. So fish are like this, and lizards are like this, but mammals are doing something different. Mammals have these rear bones here in mammals became very small. And now, if you look at a human skull, do I have one? No, I don't. If you look at a human skull, we only have one jawbone, but we have several bones in our ears. And they're very tiny, and they're used to pick up vibrations in the air to let us hear a wider range of sounds. They're not used to bite things. They're not used to extract oxygen from anything. They're used to hear with. So we have the same organ going from something that gets plankton out of water to something that you can bite things with, to something you can use to hear with. That's exaptation. One organ ends up going through many different uses. As time goes on, you'll end up with a lot of different animals experimenting with different ways of making a living. This is from Hawaii. There must be some bird that was blown onto the Hawaiian Islands by a storm. We don't know exactly what happened. All we know is today, there are many different birds that all sort of look the same. They're all very closely related to each other. Mostly the only difference between them is their beaks. This one's a nectar feeder. This one crushes seeds with its beak. This one, you can't really see it in this picture, but it has a very strange beak. The upper part of its beak is the sharp pick that it uses to poke holes in wood, and the lower part of the beak is like an awl. It's a blunt, sharp. Sorry, it's a blunt, heavy sort of tool that it can use to dig insects out of the hole. So this is trying to be a woodpecker, but going about it in a different way. So different mutations have ended up causing the ancestral population to split into a bunch of different species.
This reminds me that evolution isn't design.
Right.
It's more like improv.
Yeah.
We work with what you've got and say, how do I use this?
Right.
There's no one even asking that question. It happens or it dies.
Right.
But it's always using existing everythings to make the next thing.
Right. So it's work with what you got is a really good word for it. If you think about a person improvising, instead of a person, it's some kind of robot or something that makes random noises. But the robot hears the audience clapping, and it makes the same noises more when the audience claps. And over time, the robot will evolve a comedy routine. Depending on how whatever the audience wants, it'll give it to them. It'll take millions of years, but so this is the same idea, not on Hawaii, but in the rest of the world. There's been a longer time for birds to evolve on the continents, and so we end up with very different looking birds. Each of them does a different job in the environment. They eat in a different place, or they eat in a different way, and they avoid competing with each other. This is niche partitioning. That's enough. If you do this for long enough, if you do this for the 2 billion years that life has been evolving on Earth, you end up with a lot of very different looking organisms. You've probably seen phylogenetic trees that look like this, with something like us on one end and something really gross on the other end. And you can see how the ancestral form split off as various things evolved. We evolved jaws, and then lungs, and then fur and mammary glands, and now here we are. Beautiful chimps. And this is one way of looking at a phylogenetic tree that focuses on one species. Usually that species is us, because we're selfish like that. But if you broaden it out to include many different groups, it doesn't look so much like a line, it looks more like a tree. And here's us, by the way. We're this branch of the tree, and you can see we're somewhat related to these things, the Orchordata, and we're a little bit less related to these, the Cephalochordata, and then this whole group as a whole is related to all these things over here, including starfish. Starfish are more closely related to us than either of us are to arthropods like lobsters. You can find snails up here. They're very distantly related to us. There was even a semi-joke scientific paper that suggested that squids and octopuses were actually aliens that came from another planet, and that's why they're so different from us. And so that what we've been talking about so far is divergence, organisms becoming more different from each other over time. But you can also get convergence. This is when animals living in similar lifestyles, the same kinds of mutations get selected for, and you end up with animals that look very similar. So this is a honey glider. They're marsupials from Australia. And this is a flying squirrel. They're scuromorphs. They're related to rodents from North America. They have a common ancestor back during the age of dinosaurs, a very long time ago. We're more closely related to flying squirrels than they are to possums, but they look very similar because they have similar lifestyles. Okay, that was a lot. We're going to stop there for a minute. Any questions?
You know that bird with the beak that was curved, and he uses it to dig into a log,
This one.
pull it back. Yes, that one. how's that little short beak? I would think that would get selected out because you got this big old knife in front of you and you want to eat that bug
Yeah.
and your nose is in the way, your bill is in the way.
I think I may have gotten it mixed up. I think that when I think about it more, I think that they open their beaks and they use the lower beak to drill into wood like a woodpecker does. And then they use the upper beak to hook out the grub.
Ah,
I'm pretty sure
that-
that's what it is.
Oh, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So I think I explained it wrong the first time. Sorry about that. You can look them up. It's the very easily Googleable word of aotLW.
Oh yeah, that is so easy to Google up.
Yes. This bird is a really great example of evolution, and it has a very difficult name. But I'll send this presentation to you as text, and you can see the text and copy it.